They say a single moment can change everything. What began as a quiet stop at a dusty gas station quickly escalated into an act of injustice that shook the entire nation. But in the next few minutes, you'll see how karma doesn't play favorites, and how power crumbles when truth stands tall. Before we dive into this powerful story, we want to know, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Drop your country and local time in the comments below. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you're someone who believes in standing up against abuse, injustice, and corruption, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Because stories like this don't just inform, they empower. And we're only just getting started. It was one of those still, heavy afternoons in Mississippi where the air seemed to hang low, thick with heat and silence. The kind of day where nothing moved unless it had to, and every breath felt like wading through molasses. Alicia Moore had been driving for hours. Her black SUV cut across back roads and two-lane highways, past weathered barns and fields of swaying wheat, chasing the long shadow of the sun as it began its descent. Alicia wasn't dressed like someone important. Her clothes were simple: worn jeans, a gray utility jacket, and a pair of sturdy boots. Her face, hidden behind a pair of sunglasses, gave nothing away, but behind that quiet, low-profile appearance was a woman with more authority than anyone in that town would ever guess. She was the regional director for the Federal Justice Bureau, a position that came with more power than most state governors, and a past marked by taking down criminal networks, corrupt politicians, and dangerous militia cells. But today, Alicia wasn't chasing criminals. She was on her way home, alone and off the radar. She pulled into a faded gas station just off Route 31. It looked like time had forgotten it. A rusted-out soda machine leaned against a wall. The sign creaked in the breeze. Gravel crunched beneath her tires as she parked next to a lonely pump. No one else was there, except an old pickup truck parked in the far corner, radio humming some forgotten country tune. Alicia stepped out, stretched her back, and began refueling. Then she heard it, that unmistakable sound, the deliberate crunch of gravel under new tires. A sheriff's cruiser rolled into the lot, slow and authoritative, like a lion entering a clearing. It didn't just park, it positioned itself, blocking off the exit. Alicia noticed immediately. She didn't move. She kept her body calm and her face unreadable. She'd seen this before. Too many times. The door opened with a squeak, and out stepped a deputy. Tall, thick-armed, buzz-cut. His uniform was wrinkled, his boots were dusty, his belt sagged from the weight of gear and ego. Deputy Frank Dobson. From the moment his eyes landed on Alicia, the dynamic shifted. He didn't nod, didn't greet her. He just walked straight up with a swagger born from years of unchecked power. "You from around here?" he barked. Alicia turned her head slowly, her hands still visible. "No, just getting gas." He scanned her, eyes lingering too long. "That your vehicle?" "Yes." "License." She paused for a beat. This wasn't protocol. There was no probable cause, but Alicia knew exactly how this game worked. She reached into her inside pocket, deliberately slow, and pulled out her driver's license. Nothing else. No badge, not yet. Dobson snatched it from her hand and read the name out loud, almost like he was challenging it. "Alicia Moore. What brings you out to Clay County?" "Driving home," she said simply. He stepped closer. Too close. "SUV like that, woman like you, looks suspicious." There it was. Alicia kept her voice level. "Is there a problem, officer?" "You've got an attitude." And with no warning, he shoved her. Hard. She staggered, catching herself against the car door. The gas nozzle clanked against the side of the SUV. Pain shot up her arm, but she kept herself steady. "That wasn't necessary," she said through gritted teeth. But Dobson wasn't finished. He walked around to the passenger side, opened her door, and began rummaging through the glove box. Her belongings, papers, receipts, a protein bar, were tossed carelessly to the floor. Her personal space violated like it was nothing. She knew better than to stop him, not yet, not until she had what she needed. "The registration's in the black folder," she said, trying to defuse the situation. He yanked it out, glanced at it, and crumpled it in one hand like trash. Then he looked back at her with something mean in his eyes. And then he did it. He raised his boot and kicked her, right in the shin. The sound was sharp and final. Alicia dropped to the ground, pain exploding up her leg. Her knee hit the gravel hard. She could feel the scrape even through her jeans. Her hands caught the ground as the gas pump hissed behind her. Dobson stood over her, smirking. "That's where you belong," he said, and turned to walk away. But what he didn't see, what he couldn't know, was the teenage gas station worker, half hidden behind the service counter, holding his phone, recording everything. Alicia stayed down for only a moment, her breath shallow, her heartbeat thundered in her ears, but her eyes, cold, focused. She pushed herself up, each movement slow and precise. The pain in her leg was real, but she wore it like armor. She picked up her license from the dirt and dusted it off with a steady hand. Then her phone buzzed. A name flashed on the screen, Director Ops Secure Line. She answered calmly. "I've been assaulted, Clay County. Need full records on Deputy Frank Dobson. Complaints, partners, chain of command." "Now." "Confirmed," the voice replied. The teenager, now standing closer, lowered his phone slightly. Alicia looked at him. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried weight. "Send that video to the press. Don't wait. To everyone." The kid nodded, eyes wide. Deputy Dobson had walked away thinking he'd just scared off a nobody. He had no idea he'd just kicked the wrong woman. Alicia Moore didn't go home. Not because she couldn't, but because she wouldn't. The moment she stepped back into her SUV and drove away from that gas station, her mind had already shifted. This wasn't about pain, though her leg was swelling rapidly. This wasn't about fear, though her hands still trembled. This was about power. His misuse of it, and her reclaiming it. Instead of heading toward her house, Alicia veered west, out past the county line, to a place she knew well, a quiet roadside motel tucked behind a shuttered diner. It wasn't fancy, but it had three things she needed: seclusion, a secure Wi-Fi line, and a second-story room with a clear view of the parking lot. By the time she parked and limped upstairs, the adrenaline had faded, and the full weight of the assault hit her like a wave. Her leg throbbed, her hands were scraped raw, but her eyes, sharp. She propped her foot up on a chair, packed a towel with ice, and booted up her encrypted laptop. Her fingers moved like they were following muscle memory, opening secure portals, logging into federal clearance networks, pulling every thread she could find on Deputy Frank Dobson. Within minutes it was all there. The pattern was unmistakable. 4 prior complaints of excessive force, 2 of them filed by young black men who had been arrested during traffic stops. Another filed by a mother whose son had come home with bruises after routine questioning. And the 4th, a Latina nurse cited for a broken taillight, who claimed Dobson slammed her against her own vehicle when she asked why he was searching her bag. All 4 cases had been dismissed without further action. The names of the investigators? Always the same. The language used in reports? Nearly identical. Use of force determined to be within departmental policy? No violation of civil rights found. Officer acted appropriately given the perceived threat? The perceived threat, Alicia thought bitterly, was never about danger. It was about dominance, control, race. She sat back in the motel chair, processing. The quiet hum of the air conditioning unit barely masked the storm growing behind her eyes. She'd seen this before, in other counties, other departments, always tucked beneath official language and procedural loopholes. But this time she wasn't reading someone else's case file. This time, she was the one in the report. She picked up her phone and called a number few people knew she had. "Thomas," she said when he picked up, "I need a trace on Sheriff Marla Kent. Full campaign financing, complaints filed under her tenure, and any off-book contracts in the last 5 years." There was a pause, then a reply. "You were the one in the video, weren't you?" "Yeah," Alicia said quietly, "I was." "We're on it," he replied. "You're not alone." As the sun disappeared behind the horizon, Alicia opened the teenager's video. He'd sent it exactly 20 minutes after she left. No editing, no filter, just raw footage. Dobson's voice. His smirk. The sound of his boot slamming into her shin. The way she fell. And then, how she stood back up. She watched it 3 times. Then she did something that would change everything. She uploaded 15 seconds of that footage to a private cloud account and activated a dormant protocol she hadn't touched in years, a whistleblower cascade. The system was designed to alert investigative journalists, legal observers, and civil rights watchdogs that something big was unfolding. She didn't release her name, didn't reveal her badge. Just the video, just the moment. By the time she'd taken 2 sips of motel coffee, her phone was lighting up. A civil rights attorney in Atlanta reached out. Is this real? A journalist in Chicago messaged, "Can we speak to the woman in the clip?" An anonymous Reddit user posted the video with the caption, "This isn't just assault, this is the system in action." By 3 p.m. the next day, the video had crossed 1 million views. 3 phrases dominated every platform. Justice for her. Mood of power. She didn't stay down. It was viral, but Alicia didn't celebrate. Because she knew what virality brings. Attention, yes, but also retaliation. At 4:16 p.m., a knock sounded at her motel door. Not a banging, not aggressive, just firm, measured. She checked the peephole. No one. She opened it cautiously. On the ground sat a plain white envelope. Inside was a printed photo of her, kneeling at the gas station. Same timestamp as the teenager's video, but this photo had a second frame, a side shot taken from a different angle. Not the teen's phone. Someone else had been watching too. Beneath the photo was a note, "Stay in your lane." She closed the door, locked every bolt, and sat in silence, not out of fear, but calculation. Someone had eyes on her, which meant her actions had already hit a nerve. Good. She sent a secure message to Thomas. "They know who I am. Double down on Greystone, and pull everything you can on Sheriff Kent's ties to private security firms." An hour later, Thomas responded with a file so large it took 3 minutes to decrypt. Greystone Watch wasn't just a donor. They were embedded. Sheriff Kent had funneled nearly $2,800,000 in contracts to them in just 3 years. Contracts for equipment, surveillance training, tactical support. But more disturbing, Greystone's board included 2 former state law enforcement officials, both of whom had previously dismissed complaints filed against Dobson. The corruption wasn't a crack in the wall, it was the entire blueprint. And Alicia? She now had evidence to prove it. At 10:42 p.m. she recorded a voice memo, just a few sentences. "This isn't about one deputy. This isn't even about one county. This is about what happens when power polices itself, and no one's watching. Well, I'm watching now." She uploaded the memo alongside a clip of Dobson's shove and kick, this time overlaid with the phrase, "What happens when the wrong woman gets back up?" The internet exploded. Alicia didn't sleep that night. She tried. She lay on the stiff motel bed, one leg elevated with ice, phone screen glowing dimly beside her. But her mind wouldn't quiet. Not with everything she'd uncovered. Not with what she knew was coming. By midnight, her phone was vibrating nonstop. Journalists, advocates. A human rights lawyer from New York wanted a quote. A producer from a major news network asked for an exclusive interview. Civil rights organizations were requesting statements, background, anything she could give them. She gave none of it. Not yet. Instead, she sat back at the desk, opened a new document, and began typing. She titled it, "Clay County Pattern of Misconduct, Phase 1. Every detail she had uncovered, complaints, contracts, corruption, connections to Greystone Watch, was laid out line by line. She didn't just want headlines. She wanted structure. A case so strong it couldn't be denied, no matter who tried to bury it. By dawn, she'd filled 10 pages. At 6:12 a.m., her secure line buzzed. It was Thomas. "You've made noise," he said. "The Bureau's seen the footage. People are scrambling. Some want to protect you, others, not so much." Alicia nodded to herself. "They'll move against me before they move against the system." Exactly, which means you don't get to fight clean anymore. She exhaled. I wasn't planning to. Later that morning, Alicia checked out of the motel and relocated to a quiet safe house arranged by Thomas. It wasn't far, just across the state border, but it offered something the motel couldn't: obscurity. No cameras, no neighbors, no questions. She set up a command post in the living room, laptop on the kitchen table, files spread across the floor, one burner phone for intel, and one encrypted device for communications. Her shins still throbbed, but the pain had become part of her focus, a reminder. By noon, a new wave of headlines hit. Viral video shows deputy assaulting woman at Mississippi gas station. Anonymous source behind video may have federal ties. Silence from Clay County Sheriff's Office raises alarms. The Sheriff's Department had issued a short, sterile statement. We are aware of a video circulating online. At this time, we have no comment and no confirmation of the identities involved. No mention of Dobson, no mention of Alicia. That silence? It was strategy. But Alicia had one of her own. She compiled an audio clip, just 12 seconds long. Dobson's voice, recorded from the body cam footage the teenager had captured. It played over black screen. That's where you belong. Then Alicia's voice cut in. Not anymore. She didn't post it under her name. Instead, she sent it to an independent journalist she trusted, someone who didn't flinch under pressure. By 5:17 p.m., it had gone live. No names, no faces, just voices, just tone, just truth. The effect was immediate. Hashtags that had slowed began to spike again. Think pieces popped up. People began digging. Some users matched the location to the gas station. A few even identified Dobson by name. Then came the leak. A former deputy who'd resigned last year sent an anonymous message to a watchdog site. Everyone in Clay County knew about Dobson. Sheriff Kent covered for him. This has been going on for years. Within hours, the sheriff's office had no choice. At 9:40 p.m., they issued a second statement. Deputy Frank Dobson has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. We are cooperating with relevant authorities. Alicia read it and laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Administrative leave, she muttered. Paid vacation for breaking a woman's leg. But it wasn't the announcement that bothered her. It was the timing. It meant they were reacting, which also meant they were preparing. At 10:15 p.m., a notification pinged on her burner phone. Unknown sender, one image. Her motel room door, taken from the outside hours earlier, no message, no context, just surveillance. She stared at the photo for a long time. Then, without a word, she picked up her phone and called Thomas. It's time, she said. Release everything. You sure? He asked. They've already crossed the line. Let's show them what's on the other side. By midnight, the whistleblower cascade had activated fully. Every file Alicia had compiled. Dobson's complaint history, the Greystone contracts, body cam manipulation reports, the photo of the envelope with the message, "Stay in your lane," all of it was bundled and encrypted, then shared through multiple secure channels to federal watchdogs, press contacts, and legal networks. And just like that, the game changed. The next morning, the national headlines had shifted again. Feds to review Clay County Sheriff's Office after viral assault video. Private security ties to small-town policing under fire. Whistleblower steps forward against Mississippi deputy. Still, Alicia stayed in the shadows. Not out of fear, but strategy. Let the story build, let the outrage grow. And it did. By noon, protests had begun. Not massive ones, just a few dozen people outside the sheriff's office, holding handwritten signs, but they were loud and they were live-streamed. The chants were simple. Justice for the woman. Fire Dobson. Where's the sheriff? Inside the building, Sheriff Kent watched from behind her office blinds. She didn't speak to the press, didn't show her face, but she was already under fire from within. Alicia received a tip, quiet but confirmed. An internal audit had been ordered, not by the sheriff, by the State Oversight Committee, and they wanted to see everything. Dobson was no longer the only target. Now, it was Kent, and whoever she was protecting. That night, Thomas sent Alicia one more update. They're going to try to discredit you, paint you as a radical, maybe even claim you leaked the video to stir protests. Let them, she said. You ready for this? Alicia looked out the window. The trees outside swayed in the wind. She could still feel the bruise on her shin, the soreness in her hands. But her voice? Steady. I'm not just ready, she said. I've been waiting. They didn't break the story, the internet did. It started with a blurry photo, taken outside a federal courthouse 6 months prior, of a woman in a gray jacket and sunglasses walking out of a corruption briefing. A Reddit user posted it with the caption, "Is this the woman from the video?" Within hours, online sleuths had matched the photo to a public appearance Alicia had made at a congressional hearing years ago. The same posture, same voice, same calm fire behind her words. And just like that, her name was out. Alicia Moore, Federal Justice Bureau, Regional Director, Mid-South. The woman who had taken a boot to the shin was also one of the highest-ranking federal officials in her division. It went nuclear. Headlines across every major outlet. Federal agent assaulted by local deputy, calls for DOJ probe erupt. Viral video woman identified as senior federal official. Whistleblower wasn't civilian, she was command. Alicia didn't flinch. She had expected this, planned for it. She knew the price of visibility. Still, it was different seeing her name splashed across screens, watching cable news anchors debate her motivations, watching panelists speculate whether she had baited the deputy into attacking her. She didn't identify herself, one guest said. She wanted it to escalate, said another. She weaponized her silence. The irony was almost funny. They wanted her to apologize. For being silent when she was kicked, for not flashing her badge fast enough, for daring to exist in a space where she wasn't expected to push back. She didn't respond, not to them, but she did respond to the people who mattered. On the third day after her name went public, Alicia held a press conference, not in D.C., not at a courthouse, but in the very county where it all happened, Clay County. She stood at a makeshift podium outside a community center, flanked by no one, no team, no security, just a microphone and the weight of her own truth. Cameras clicked, live streams rolled, dozens of locals gathered, many holding signs, some in support, others in suspicion. Alicia looked out at them, eyes steady. "My name is Alicia Moore," she began, "and yes, I'm the woman in the video." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I have served this country for 27 years. I've worked cases from cartel takedowns to public sector corruption. I've worn this badge with honor and humility." She held up her ID, but then placed it back in her pocket. "And I did not show this badge the day Deputy Dobson assaulted me, because I wanted to see how far he'd go, and he went all the way." Silence. Thick. Heavy. "I wasn't testing him," she continued. "I was living. I was buying gas. I didn't owe him proof of my worthiness. He owed me basic respect." A voice shouted from the crowd, "Why didn't you say who you were?" She met the voice directly. "Because my protection should not depend on my rank," she said. "It should depend on my rights." The crowd was quiet now, even the skeptics. "I am not here to be a symbol. I'm not here to go viral. I'm here to say this. What happened to me wasn't unusual. It was typical. And that's the problem." Then, slowly, deliberately, she took out a folder from the podium. "Here are 11 excessive force complaints filed in Clay County over the last 5 years. 8 of them were dismissed without review. 4 had video evidence that was lost. 2 never even made it into the record." She paused. One of them was a 16-year-old boy who still limps to this day. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. This isn't about one deputy. This is about a culture, a system that tells officers like Dobson that they are the law instead of servants of it, a system that protects misconduct, silences truth, and punishes anyone who speaks out. Cameras flashed, reporters jotted notes furiously. Alicia leaned forward, voice unwavering. "I will not be silenced, I will not be intimidated, and I will not let my position be used as a shield to deflect accountability. If they're willing to assault a federal agent in broad daylight, imagine what they do when no one's watching." And with that, she ended the conference. No questions. No slogans. Just truth. That night, news coverage shifted again. It wasn't just about the video anymore. It was about what Alicia had exposed. A pattern, a culture, a shield of silence wrapped in a badge. But as her visibility grew, so did the resistance. By morning, false stories began to circulate. Claims that Alicia had doctored the footage, that she had a vendetta against law enforcement, that she had ties to radical groups seeking to dismantle police departments. One anonymous email sent to a major network claimed she had staged the entire event, that she had parked at that gas station knowing Dobson would be there. The smear campaign had begun. Alicia watched it unfold from her safe house. She didn't react, instead she built. With Thomas and two other trusted allies, she began mapping out what they called the firewall, a network of proof, testimonies, internal memos, financial records, and civilian interviews that made one thing clear. What happened to her was not random. It was symptomatic. By the end of the week, she had a timeline, a dossier, a list of names, sheriff's department staff, investigators, clerks, judges, who had either enabled or ignored years of abuse. And at the top of that list, Sheriff Marla Kent. On Friday morning, Alicia submitted a formal request for federal review under the Civil Rights Accountability Act. It was co-signed by 2 senators and the National Board of the Public Integrity League. The response from the Department of Justice? We're listening. But listening wasn't enough. So Alicia gave them more. She leaked an internal memo from 3 years ago, signed by Sheriff Kent, dismissing a recommendation to place Dobson under suspension following an assault on a civilian that resulted in hospitalization. The memo included one line that made national headlines. "Frank may be aggressive, but he keeps order." That was it, the crack in the dam. And Alicia, she was ready for the flood. They didn't come with bullets. They came with headlines. The morning after Alicia's press conference, major news sites that had previously praised her bravery began to shift tone. Phrases like controversial official and divisive figure appeared beneath her name. On one morning segment, a panel debated whether Alicia had abused her position to manipulate the media narrative. She knew this part was coming. When you challenge power, it doesn't fight fair, it fights dirty. It didn't take long. At 9:13 a.m., an anonymous tip hit a D.C. political blog claiming that Alicia Moore had violated federal protocols by engaging in unauthorized public commentary while under investigation. No source, no confirmation, but it spread like wildfire. By noon, several mainstream outlets were repeating the claim, often pairing it with video snippets taken out of context. The Bureau's Internal Affairs Division released a brief statement. "We are reviewing conduct related to recent media appearances." No names. But everyone knew who they meant. Alicia sat alone in the safe house, watching the headlines evolve like a virus, each one more calculated than the last. Her legs still ached, wrapped in tight bandages. Her inbox was flooded, not with praise, but with demands for answers. Why did you go public? Why now? Why didn't you wait for the investigation? The irony hit hard. For days she had been accused of being silent. Now she was being punished for speaking. Thomas called. "They're trying to freeze you out. If they can't discredit the facts, they'll discredit the voice behind them." Alicia didn't flinch. "Then, I'll give them something they can't erase." That night, she uploaded a full video timeline, a documentary-style breakdown of everything that had happened since the gas station assault. It wasn't just about the attack anymore. It was about the cover-up, the history of abuse, the system that protected Dobson and others like him. She backed up every claim with documentation, memos, body cam screenshots, legal records, interviews from prior victims. It wasn't emotional, it was surgical. Within hours, the video hit 2 million views. But so did something else. At 2:26 a.m., Alicia was woken by the sound of tires outside the safe house. She peeked through the blinds. A black SUV idled at the edge of the gravel drive. Tinted windows, no plates. After 30 seconds, it pulled away. No one knocked, no one got out. But they didn't need to. It was a message, "We know where you are." She called Thomas. It started. He didn't ask what she meant. I'll increase the digital shield, move you to backup location C. But Alicia shook her head. No, I'm done hiding. By morning, a second wave of retaliation hit. Her bank accounts were flagged for unusual activity. Her official FBI clearance was marked under temporary review. An encrypted email from an unknown address simply read, "Back down or you won't just lose your job, you'll lose your legacy." She saved the email, then forwarded directly to a journalist. Later that afternoon, her former supervisor at the bureau, a man named Richard Weller, gave a quote to a national paper. "Agent Moore has always been passionate, but passion, when unchecked, becomes problematic." It stung more than she expected. Richard had once mentored her. He knew the truth, but the system needed a scapegoat, and he had just offered her up. Alicia turned to her growing digital team, a small circle of investigators, legal experts, and former field agents who believed in her. She called them the Firewall. Together they launched a coordinated counteroffensive. They compiled dozens of civilian testimonies, people who had filed complaints in Clay County and never received follow-ups. One mother whose son had been jailed for 2 nights without formal charges. A man whose body cam footage had accidentally been corrupted. A woman who had been stopped 13 times in 2 years for routine checks. Each story layered upon the last, and each one carried the same message. This wasn't about Alicia Moore, this was about a system. But the most explosive piece came next. A whistleblower, anonymous but verified, sent Alicia a private file. It was a surveillance log, not on her, but on journalists. A list of media figures who had covered her story positively, their travel habits, family information, addresses. Someone had been watching them. And that meant only one thing. This wasn't just about protecting Sheriff Kent. This was about protecting something bigger. She contacted an independent legal group and arranged a closed-door session with a federal prosecutor named Elena Cross, a woman known for taking down organized corruption in the Midwest. They met in a quiet office in Atlanta, under tight security. Alicia handed over the entire file. "I'm not asking you to protect me," she said. "I'm asking you to protect the next woman who doesn't have a badge to flash." Elena read through the document silently, her face tightening. "Who else has seen this?" she asked. "No one outside my team, yet." "Good, keep it that way for 24 hours. Let me move some things." Alicia nodded. "They tried to ruin me." Elena's eyes met hers. "Then let's ruin them first." The next morning, a special federal inquiry was announced into Sheriff Kent's office and its ties to Greystone Watch. The investigation was backed by multiple senators and launched under the oversight of a bipartisan watchdog panel. That same day, Alicia received a certified letter from the Bureau. Suspension effective immediately, badge revoked. She read it once, then placed it carefully on the table. The badge they'd taken? It was never her source of power. Her truth was. And she wasn't done. She released a video, short, composed, direct. "I have been stripped of my title, not because I broke the law, but because I exposed how the law was being broken. I am no longer a federal agent, but I am still a citizen. I am still a woman, and I am still watching." The clip went viral in less than an hour. But this time, the hashtags weren't just about her injury, they were about her courage. Truth doesn't wear a badge. She didn't fall, she stood. They silenced her title, not her voice. And as the tide began to turn, Alicia prepared for her next move. Because the system hadn't just underestimated her. It had awakened her. When they took her badge, they thought they took her power. They were wrong. Alicia Moore had never relied on the badge. The badge gave her access, but her fire? That came from somewhere much deeper. Years of watching people like Frank Dobson walk away from consequences, watching systems bend to protect the very people who poisoned them. Now she didn't need access. She needed reach. And the internet had given her exactly that. The day after her suspension, Alicia woke up to a storm of solidarity. People weren't just angry, they were awake. The viral video of her final words, "I'm still watching," had triggered a wave of reaction that neither the Bureau nor Clay County could contain. Artists painted murals of her face across city walls. College students organized marches. Hashtags surged again, not centered on victimhood, but resistance. She stood, so will we. From badge to blaze. Burn it from the root. But behind the hashtags, something more dangerous was building. Thomas called her from a burner line. His voice was tense. We've confirmed what we feared. Greystone wasn't just a donor to Sheriff Kent. They were laundering money through county contracts. How much? Alicia asked. North of $5 million over 7 years, split between surveillance upgrades, equipment procurement, and off-the-books training services. But it gets worse. Alicia exhaled. It always does. Some of Greystone's shell companies is tied to a former state senator, Everett Granger. She froze. Granger. A man who had once chaired the very committee that set oversight policies for regional sheriffs. A man who had authored legislation that weakened internal affairs access to small-town police records. A man who had been praised in the press for being tough on urban crime, while secretly lobbying for private security firms to receive state grants. You're telling me the man who gutted police accountability also funded the force abusing it? Yes, Thomas said. And he's still pulling strings. Alicia stood from the table and walked to the window. The wind stirred the pine trees just outside the safe house. She could feel it in her chest now. Not just the weight of injustice, but the clarity of it. They hadn't suspended her to protect the Bureau. They had done it to protect Granger. To protect the machine. But she had something the machine didn't. Time, evidence, and nothing left to lose. She met with Elena Cross again, this time not in secret. This time in a full-blown legal strategy session with federal agents, financial auditors, and media liaisons. Alicia brought every document, every cross-referenced contract, every time-stamped video. Together they built a map. At the center, Sheriff Marla Kent. Above her, Everett Granger. Around them, Greystone executives, county officials, campaign donors, and judges who had dismissed civil cases on technical grounds. What they uncovered wasn't just corruption. It was an ecosystem. Every part fed the next. Sheriff Kent's office funneled local contracts to Greystone. Greystone funneled money back to political campaigns. Judges protected the flow. State oversight turned a blind eye. It wasn't broken. It was built that way. Elena leaned back in her chair, stunned. We can't just go after one person. This is RICO territory. Alicia nodded. Exactly. We don't burn one tree, we burn the whole orchard. They spent 3 days finalizing the submission, a sealed affidavit over 300 pages, co-signed by Alicia and 3 federal attorneys. It laid out a case for systemic fraud, obstruction of justice, civil rights violations, and conspiracy to manipulate public funds. On the 4th morning, they submitted it. The DOJ didn't hesitate. Within 12 hours, a multi-jurisdictional federal investigation was launched, spanning 5 counties, 2 private firms, and 1 former state senator's entire financial network. But they weren't the only ones moving. That night, Alicia's safe house was broken into. She wasn't there. Thomas had convinced her to relocate that morning after spotting a drone hovering above the trees. When they returned later, they found her documents shredded, laptops smashed, and a message spray-painted across the wall. You should have stayed silent. But silence had never been Alicia's nature. The next morning she went live-streamed from an undisclosed location, speaking calmly to over 2.4 million viewers. They broke into my safe house last night. They thought they could scare me into disappearing, but all they did was prove everything we've said is true. She paused. They're not protecting Clay County. They're protecting a business, a political machine, a corrupt empire funded by fear and fueled by silence, and we're going to dismantle it, one name, one file, one lie at a time. Her words weren't angry, they were surgical. She ended the broadcast with 3 words. Truth doesn't vanish. By the end of the week, the DOJ issued subpoenas to Sheriff Kent, Granger, and multiple Greystone board members. Kent was placed under federal supervision. Granger's legal team went dark. Greystone's headquarters was raided. Laptops, hard drives, and financial records were seized. The machine was collapsing. And Alicia, she was just getting started. She began mentoring other whistleblowers, quietly, through encrypted networks, nurses, teachers, municipal staff, all with stories like hers, all ready to speak if someone just helped them feel less alone. "I'm not the exception," she told them. "I'm the example." She partnered with independent media outlets to tell their stories. Not sensationalized, not dramatized, just raw, honest, undeniable. Meanwhile, protesters across multiple states held up signs that simply read, "We see the roots now." Inside government offices, bureaucrats whispered her name. Some feared her, others admired her, but no one ignored her. She had become more than a woman who stood back up. She had become a reckoning. And in the quiet hours, when the cameras turned off and the phone buzzed less frequently, Alicia Moore would stare at the map she'd built, the one that began with a boot to her shin and ended with a power structure unraveling in real time. Every pushback, every smear, every threat, it hadn't stopped her. It had sharpened her. And the truth she carried? It was burning now, right down to the root. The courtroom wasn't built for truth. It was built for process, for routine, for carefully measured testimonies and redacted facts. But when Alicia Moore walked into the Senate hearing chamber in Washington, D.C., she didn't come to follow the process. She came to break it open. It had been 2 weeks since the federal investigation began, 2 weeks since her safe house was raided, since Granger went silent, since Sheriff Kent was placed under emergency review and Greystone's headquarters went dark. The country was watching. The Department of Justice had formally launched a special inquiry, and the Senate Oversight Committee summoned Alicia Moore to testify, under oath, under lights, under pressure. She showed up alone. No legal team, no entourage. Just a single manila folder tucked under her arm, and the kind of calm that comes from knowing the truth is heavier than fear. As she took her seat behind the microphone, dozens of reporters typed rapidly. Live streams spiked in viewer count. Social media lit up. She's walking into the lion's den. Moore versus the machine. Truth doesn't plead the fifth. Alicia sat upright, eyes forward, shoulders squared. The committee chair, Senator Elaine Brookshire, adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. "Moore, thank you for being here." Alicia nodded once. "We understand you've faced significant public attention following recent events. Do you feel safe right now?" Alicia didn't blink. "I feel necessary." Gasps echoed quietly through the chamber. Brookshire leaned forward. "Let's begin at the beginning. Why didn't you identify yourself to Deputy Dobson at the gas station?" "Because he never asked who I was," Alicia replied. "He only asked what I was doing there, and decided I didn't belong." A murmur spread across the room. Brookshire nodded, trying to remain neutral. "And what happened next, from your perspective?" Alicia opened the folder and slid a printed photograph across the table. It was a frame from the video. Dobson's boot, her leg, the instant of impact. "From my perspective," she said quietly, "I was assaulted by a man who felt untouchable." Senator Grayson, sitting 2 seats down from Brookshire, leaned forward. "Mr. Moore, you've accused several public officials of participating in what you call a pattern of institutional protectionism. Isn't that a stretch?" Alicia turned toward him. Her voice stayed even. "A stretch is asking the public to believe that a deputy with 4 complaints, protected by a sheriff with a record of buried misconduct, funded by a company with political ties to your campaign, is just a coincidence." The room went still. Brookshire cleared her throat. "Please stick to the facts, Ms. Moore." "I am," Alicia said. "The facts have names and addresses and contracts." She reached into her folder again and pulled out a document titled Internal Memo, Dobson's Suspension Recommendation, Ignored. She read aloud. Subject displays repeated aggression toward minority civilians. Recommendation, temporary leave pending investigation. Date, 18 months prior to my assault. Signed, Captain R. Lopez. Action taken, none. Signed off by Sheriff Marla Kent. Brookshire nodded solemnly. "That memo has since been confirmed, but some claim you are politicizing this issue." Alicia raised an eyebrow. Is it political to ask for accountability, or is it just inconvenient? Senator Grayson interrupted. You're not a prosecutor. You're not even currently employed by the Bureau. What gives you the right to lead this narrative? Alicia looked him dead in the eyes. Truth, she said. That's what gives me the right. Grayson opened his mouth to speak again, but Brookshire raised a hand. Senator, please. The rest of the hearing unfolded like a controlled burn. Alicia answered every question, not with rehearsed lines, but with timelines, documents, and facts. She never raised her voice, never attacked. She let the system show its own rot. And it did. By the end of the session, 3 more internal documents had been entered into the public record. One showing that Greystone had lobbied to expand rural law enforcement funding, then funneled it into tech upgrades that were never installed. Another revealing that a judge who dismissed a civil brutality case had financial ties to a campaign PAC linked to Granger. And the third, perhaps the most damning, showed that the same state official who signed off on Dobson's early promotion had once served on Greystone's advisory board. The dots weren't just connected. They were forming a map, and Alicia was holding the compass. When the session closed, Brookshire made a final statement. Ms. Moore, this committee acknowledges your courage. Your testimony will shape the course of this investigation. Thank you. Alicia didn't smile. She simply stood, gathered her folder, and walked out. Outside, the media swarmed, microphones pushed forward. Moore, do you feel vindicated? Are you planning to sue the Bureau? Do you regret going public? Alicia stopped just long enough to give one answer. I regret not doing it sooner. That night, her testimony aired across every major news channel. The public reaction was immediate and thunderous. Donations to police reform initiatives tripled. State officials called for new oversight bills. Anonymous whistleblowers began flooding secure portals with new allegations from other counties, other departments. And behind closed doors, indictments were being drafted. Granger's team issued a vague denial. Sheriff Kent's lawyer requested a delay in testimony, citing stress illness. Greystone's board suspended 2 executives, but it was too late. The public had seen the mask fall off. And Alicia Moore? She was already moving again. The closer you get to the truth, the more it costs. Alicia Moore knew that. She just hadn't calculated how personal the cost would be. The day after her Senate testimony, she received a package with no return address. It wasn't the usual hate mail or veiled threats she'd grown used to. This was different. It was small, square, and far too carefully wrapped. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single flash drive. And a note. Before the world learns it, maybe you should remember. She stared at it in silence. Thomas was already scanning the contents in another room, running a security check on the files. When he returned, his face was pale. It's from 15 years ago, he said. Footage of a case you worked in Illinois. Closed files, internal only. Alicia's blood ran cold. She already knew which one. Pull it up, she said. The screen flickered to life. A grainy body cam feed, an alleyway. Her younger self, 20 pounds lighter, more fire in her eyes than strategy, standing over a man in cuffs, a suspect in a federal weapons sting. He had just been tackled, his arm broken. Her voice could be heard off camera. You want to play hardball? Fine. But don't pretend you're innocent when you made your choice the minute you picked up that gun. It wasn't damning on its own, but it was cold, calculated, the kind of tone people would twist out of context, the kind of clip media could chop and reframe. But it wasn't the clip itself that scared her. It was who recorded it. That footage had never been released, never even logged as official. It was buried in a classified server, accessible only by a select few. Someone had dug deep. Someone wanted to rattle her. Thomas looked up. This is the warning shot, not to silence you, to taint you, to suggest hypocrisy, to crack the image you've built. Alicia nodded slowly. They want to say I was once like them. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. Because she had been not like Dobson, not corrupt, but hard, unforgiving. There were cases where she'd let anger win, moments where she'd treated suspects like threats before they were proven guilty. She had been shaped by a system she thought she was fixing from within, before she realized it was built to stay broken. And now that past was knocking. Later that evening, she received an encrypted message from an anonymous account. The message was simple. "You want full collapse? You go down with it." She didn't respond. Instead, she called Elena Cross. "We have a problem," Alicia said. Elena was quiet on the line. Then, "Is it real?" "Yes." "Is it you?" "Yes." Another pause. "Do you regret it?" Alicia sat back, staring at the screen, watching the younger version of herself sneer down at a suspect who never even got convicted. "Yes," she whispered. Elena didn't flinch. "Then let's use it." "Own it, say it first, say it loud before they do." "You want me to expose myself?" "No," Elena replied. "I want you to free yourself. If you carry this secret any longer, they'll weaponize it. If you release it first, they'll choke on it." Alicia stayed silent for a long moment. Then she nodded and began to write. She posted a public statement across every channel she had. 15 years ago, I was a younger agent in a broken system. I believed being hard meant being just. I was wrong. I said things I regret. I did not physically harm anyone, but I failed to protect dignity in that moment. I've spent every year since working to make sure that mistake does not define me. The truth isn't always clean, but it is mine, and I refuse to hide it. The reaction was split. Some praised her courage, others seized on the clip, calling her a hypocrite. Talk shows ran it on loop. Pundits asked if she was just another angry enforcer in a nicer suit. But the people who mattered, the ones who had been silenced, the ones watching to see if she would flinch, they stayed with her. Because if the system could use your past to bury your truth, no one was safe. By the weekend, new subpoenas were issued. Granger was ordered to testify. Sheriff Kent's communications were fully unsealed, and Greystone's financials were placed under forensic audit. That's when the final crack appeared. A single wire transfer, dated 7 months prior, from a Greystone shell account to a private firm registered in the Cayman Islands. Recipient, Vanguard Tactics Group, a defense contractor linked to Vincent Hargrove. Alicia froze when she saw the name. Hargrove was the quiet architect behind multiple shadow programs, privatized surveillance, political lobbying, even federal crisis management. She had heard his name before, whispered in rooms too sensitive to record, but now he wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a thread, one that led straight into federal policy, and someone had just handed her the end of it. Thomas stared at the file. "We're not talking about small-town corruption anymore." "No," Alicia said. "We're talking about a network that lets small-town corruption exist." A pause. "Do we go public?" She looked at the footage still playing silently in the corner, her own voice from 15 years ago echoing across a dark alley. Then she looked at the message she had just posted. She thought of everything she'd already lost, and everything she'd ignited. And she said, "We don't go public, we go surgical." The deeper you dig, the clearer the pattern becomes. Alicia Moore had followed threads before: corruption, misused funds, cover-ups. But this wasn't just a web, it was a machine. And at the center of that machine sat one name that had haunted encrypted reports for years: Vincent Hargrove. He wasn't an elected official, he didn't wear a badge, he'd never shown up on a campaign trail. But his name sat quietly on advisory boards, private equity portfolios, and shell companies that specialized in crisis logistics. He called himself a consultant. But Alicia knew better. He was a strategist, for power, for silence, for systems built to outlast scandal. If Sheriff Kent was the executioner and Granger the architect, Hargrove was the engineer of impunity. And now, finally, he was within reach. The Vanguard Tactics wire transfer had cracked the door open, but Alicia needed more. She needed proximity. So she played the one card she hadn't touched, an old asset from her days in the Intelligence Liaison Office, a woman named Delia Byrne. Delia wasn't just a contact, she was a phantom, once part of Hargrove's private contracting group, now quietly retired to a vineyard in Virginia with more firewalls around her digital life than most embassies. Alicia sent her one message. He's still active. And it's time. An hour later, Delia called. I figured you'd come knocking eventually, she said dryly. You still have access? I have access to his shadow, not the man himself. Good, Alicia said. I don't need him to talk, I just need him to move. They devised a trap. Delia would leak false chatter through old intel channels, a whisper that Alicia Moore had uncovered a set of sealed contracts tying Hargrove's firm directly to illegal operations in 4 southern counties. The bait? A fabricated meeting between Alicia and DOJ representatives to finalize the case. Location: an unused federal training facility outside of Norfolk, isolated, easy to observe. Delia's final message: if he bites, you'll have 12 minutes to lock him. Alicia didn't flinch. 12 minutes was all she needed. The morning of the operation, Alicia dressed simply. Black slacks, gray jacket, soft boots. No badge, no press. Just a GoPro stitched into the strap of her satchel and a single backup team monitoring the exterior from 3 vehicles. By 10:24 a.m., she was seated at a steel table inside the dim facility, empty folders on the surface, blank legal pads stacked to one side, a cup of coffee she didn't touch. At 10:41 a.m., a black luxury sedan pulled up to the building's side entrance. No plates. 2 men stepped out first, broad, business casual, clipped earpieces, then, after a pause, him. Vincent Hargrove, mid-60s, silver hair cut close, crisp suit, no tie, calm as a stone. He walked in like he owned the air. Alicia, he said, voice smooth as glass, you've become quite the storm. She didn't stand, she didn't offer a handshake. I could say the same, except storms don't hide behind private equity firms. He smiled faintly, then sat opposite her. I'm not here to threaten you, he said. No, she replied. You're here to gauge whether I can be redirected. He tilted his head. I'm here to remind you that systems don't collapse from within. They evolve, they adapt. But only if guided. Alicia leaned forward slightly. And how many bodies does it take to guide that evolution? How many Dobsons, how many mothers buried sons because your systems called it order? Silence. He didn't blink. You've made a lot of enemies. And none of them scare me. Then let me ask you something, Alicia. His voice dropped. Do you want justice, or do you just want revenge? Alicia didn't answer with words. She pressed a button beneath the table. And in the next room, the recording, audio, and visual was saved to 3 secure cloud locations. One with her legal team, one with the DOJ, and one with an independent press group. She looked him dead in the eye. I want both, and I just got one. His smile faltered. The door behind him opened. Thomas entered quietly, flanked by 2 federal agents. Hargrove stood, adjusting his jacket. You think this stops anything? He asked. No, Alicia said, but it makes damn sure it never starts again. He didn't resist. Didn't shout, just nodded once, as if conceding a game of chess 3 moves before checkmate. As they led him out, Alicia felt something strange. Not triumph, not even relief, but clarity, because now she understood what made Hargrove dangerous. It wasn't his money. It wasn't his reach. It was the belief that no one would ever come looking. And today, someone had. That evening, the footage of the meeting was aired across 4 major networks. It wasn't leaked, it was released. Strategically, legally, and deliberately, clips were looped across social media. You've become quite the storm. Do you want justice or just revenge? I want both. By midnight, 3 more whistleblowers stepped forward, 2 from Greystone's compliance division, 1 from the state budget office. All with documentation showing Hargrove's influence on procurement policy, law enforcement training contracts, and oversight exemptions. It was no longer a scandal. It was a federal breach. The DOJ issued a statement. We are pursuing the full dismantling of a coordinated network that exploited law enforcement infrastructure for personal and political gain. And Alicia. She didn't celebrate. She packed. Because she knew this wasn't the end. It was just the decapitation. The machine still had limbs. And now, without a head, they'd start swinging wild. But Alicia, she'd be waiting. It didn't happen in a flash, not all at once. Reckonings never do. They arrive in slow collapses, boardrooms emptied, mugshots processed, press releases rewritten by shaking hands. And in this case, they began on a Monday morning in Clay County, Missouri, with a convoy of federal agents moving through the sheriff's department like a blade through silk. Sheriff Marla Kent was led out in cuffs, not just for obstruction of justice, but for conspiracy, fraud, and destruction of evidence. She didn't speak to the cameras, didn't cry. She simply lowered her head, the badge she once wore now zipped into a clear plastic evidence bag. 30 minutes later, in a gated suburb of Jefferson City, former state Senator Everett Granger was arrested on 14 federal counts. Wire fraud, abuse of office, bribery, racketeering. He had tried to flee. Early reports said his legal team had already pre-booked a flight under an alias, but the marshals caught him packing a go-bag under his staircase. And 3 days after that, Vincent Hargrove was officially indicted. The charges were buried in legal jargon, but the message was clear. Your empire is over. Back in Washington, the Senate issued a joint resolution calling for sweeping reforms in law enforcement oversight. Mandatory body cam uploads, contract transparency, and independent citizen review boards in counties below 100,000 residents. They called it the Moore Reform Act. Alicia didn't ask for her name to be on it. But she didn't remove it either. By the end of the month, 17 lower-level officials had been indicted across 5 counties. 5 judges were under review. Greystone Watch lost all government contracts and announced its dissolution before the end of the quarter. But amidst the crumbling system, Alicia Moore wasn't celebrating. She was packing. Again. She stood in the center of a small house outside Atlanta. Quiet, with wood floors and wide windows. Not a safe house this time. Not a bunker. Just a place with walls that didn't echo trauma. Thomas stood at the door. They're offering you reinstatement, he said. Badge, office, whatever you want. You'll have more authority than ever. Alicia folded a shirt and placed it neatly into a bag. I don't want a desk, she said. They'll want you to lead task forces, speak at summits, train agents. She zipped the bag. I already did all of that, she replied. Didn't change the system. Thomas leaned against the frame. So what now? Alicia paused, then turned to face him. I don't want to manage power, she said. I want to keep chasing where it hides. And that's when the decision was made. She turned down the offer. Not because she didn't believe in the work, but because she believed in it too much to be caged by its bureaucracy again. Instead, she launched a new initiative, the Hollow Project, a whistleblower protection and investigative research network that operated across state lines, independent of political control. Staffed by retired agents, civic watchdogs, and digital activists. Its mission was simple: find the hollows where law failed to reach and bring the light in. The public response was overwhelming. Donations flooded in, volunteers signed up. Within 6 weeks, they were operating in 6 cities. Within 6 months, they had helped bring 3 more departments under federal review. But Alicia? She kept her footprint light. No press tours, no TED Talks, no book deals. She gave one final interview on a rainy morning in D.C., sitting across from a journalist who had covered her story since day one. What do you think justice means now? The interviewer asked. Alicia looked out the window for a long moment before answering. Justice isn't punishment, she said. It's prevention. It's a system that doesn't wait until the damage is done to care. The journalist leaned forward. And do you think we're there yet? Alicia turned back, calm and steady. No, she said, but now, at least we're looking. That night, she returned to the place where it had all started. The gas station. It looked different now, repaved, repainted, a new digital pump, a surveillance tower installed. Someone had even planted a small tree where the gravel had once bitten into her knee. And beside the pump, a plaque. She didn't fall, she stood. In memory of one voice that woke 1,000 more. There were no cameras, no crowd, no microphone. Just Alicia Moore, standing alone. She placed her hand on the metal, eyes closed, not in grief, but in gratitude. Then she walked back to her car. No badge. No fear. Just purpose. Because she knew something now. Something every person who'd ever faced down a giant needed to understand. The system isn't afraid of noise, it's afraid of persistence. And Alicia Moore? She wasn't done. She was just moving again. What started with a single kick became a storm of truth. And one woman, stripped of her title, tested by her past, chose not to stay silent. She chose to stand. If Alicia's story moved you, it's because it wasn't just about her. It was about every person who's ever been told to stay in their lane. Every voice that was silenced before it could rise. So, now it's your turn. Tell us where you're watching from. What part of Alicia's journey hit you hardest? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, loud, raw, and without apology, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. We've got more truth to tell. And we're just getting started.